Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Meaningful Communication Show. I'm your co-host, Chad Eves, here with Michael Gansel and our guest, Harrison Wise. Michael, would you like to introduce Harrison to everybody?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And this is really my pleasure. I'd like to introduce a good friend and friend of mine, Harrison Wise. Harrison is a career marketing communications pro agency leader and 3 times entrepreneur with a passion for strategy and creative problem solving. Now, since 2007, Harrison has been at the helm of Wise Collective, a full service marketing communications agency with a focus on technology, cannabis, media, and entertainment verticals. Today, I'd like to focus on the fact that he is the founder and publisher of the Bluntness, actually a digital media and marketing platform at the intersection of cannabis and psychedelic community, culture, and commerce, which he launched in 2018. So that's a long introduction, but I think we're better off letting Harrison start to talk about himself, and then, as in we typically do, we'll ask him a bunch of questions. How did he get here? Why is he here? What is he up to? And how's life treating him these days?
Awesome. Well, thank you for that intro, Michael. It was a pretty succinct summary. I've had a lot of hats in my career, and it's hard to summarize that in a quick 1-minute intro. But I think you did a good job there, Michael. So thank you. It's great to be here.
So I have a question. So obviously, the Bluntness is your current focus here, and how did you arrive at that? Because looking at your LinkedIn profile and your experiences and everything that Michael just shared, I read where you start off with a undergrad in journalism, and then through the work in various types of marketing and work like that. How did you land, and what is your goal with the Bluntness?
So we're gonna have to go back a couple of years. I hope we have enough time and film on this recording on this camera here. But I'm a career marketing communications guy, specifically an agency guy. Started my career working in the tech agency world during the .com boom and .com bust, and then in 2007 got the sort of kick in the pants to start my own business. I was in-house at a video ad tech startup as their VP of corporate communications. And the company had more engineers and salespeople and went out of business. It was one of my first experiences with a company going under, while I was in-house. And I was kind of, just wondering, what should I do next? And it was, just the catalyst for starting my own agency. So that was 2007. The roots are also in tech of my agency life, and tech in all its forms. Tech touches so many industries, and while we were focused predominantly on advertising and marketing technology industries and some other consumer and B2B industries, we started doing some work in like 2010, 2011 in the agricultural tech space, and we were retained to work with this incubator out of San Francisco called SF New Tech. And they had a partnership with an agricultural bank called Rabobank. And they were introducing a food innovation festival called Food Bites in 2013 timeframe, if my recollection serves me. And it was through that endeavor that we were coming into contact with people who were cultivating food and innovating food. But if you know anything about the cannabis industry, there's a lot of synergies there between cultivation, growing, whether it's indoor or outdoor, lighting cycles, or technologies to increased harvest, to sensors that detect the pH balance of soil or water. So there's a lot of crossover between a traditional agricultural industry and the cannabis industry, which is an agricultural industry first and foremost. So it was through that exercise that we started coming into contact with people from the cannabis industry, predominantly in California on the West Coast, where it's, certainly a bit more evolved. And we, in 2015, were approached by a company that is now, fairly well known, but at the time was under the radar, a company called MedMen. And we were the agency of record for MedMen and launched MedMen into the market just ahead of Prop 64 in California, which was their vote for adult legalization, adult use. And that was really our crash course in the legal cannabis industry. So it was through that exercise of helping this company, introduce itself to the marketplace at a time when not very many companies were very public about talking about cannabis, never mind working in cannabis and being the sort of the person holding the baton in terms of the industry. So, we developed a multi-platform, multi-channel platform and communications platform for MedMen to help mainstream cannabis. That was sort of our overarching goal. And because they had retail locations, the sort of secondary, communications platform was to position the store, their retail brand, as the Apple Store of weed, which today is still the bar with, by which most retailers, strive to, or most cannabis retailers strive to reach. And I think we were quite successful in that. We were fortunate too that their CEO at the time, Adam Bierman, is for you're a communications pro, Chad. So you understand sometimes you need our thought leaders and executives to kind of have a perspective, have a strong opinion, give those quotable quotes. So Mr. Bierman was the perfect bombastic CEO for this kind of industry at that time. So we were very fortunate. It was a very nice turn of events to work with someone like that. So that was our introduction to the cannabis industry. And the more I learned about the industry and saw some gaps in the marketplace, that, to make a long story short or a short story longer, was how I arrived at launching the Bluntness. I saw a gap in the marketplace between the kind of heavy, very, very hardcore cannabis growers, like the High Times, folks, the people that are just really into the landrace strains and the genetics and stuff that goes over most people's heads, people just typical consumers. And then there was like this, on the other side of the spectrum was just very, very heavy culture centric coverage and media.
Harrison?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Jump in.
So then what is the Bluntness? What is it? You started that in 2018. What is exactly the Bluntness?
It is a media channel designed to help educate consumers about cannabis and psychedelics through the voices and stories of those at the forefront of the industry. That at its core is what it is. It is also a marketing channel that is offering compliant marketing solutions to the cannabis industry, which everyone, well, if everyone doesn't know, is overregulated and has very restrictive advertising regulations around it. So,
and who is your target audience then?
Mainstream consumers and the industry. So because we speak to people at the forefront of the industry, we are reaching, industry thought leaders and, those that serve the industry, as well as consumers. Because like I said, we are helping educate consumers through the voices and stories of those, in the industry and driving the industry forward.
Now you started in 2018, 2020, actually the eve of 2023. Can you tell us what are some of the changes that you saw when you first started to today?
That's a good question, Michael. I mean, the fact that legalization has spread as far and as wide as it has is certainly proof that there is a desire for cannabis, and the fact that even during COVID, it was considered an essential service. So all of those things are a byproduct of, I take a lot of pride in the work we did with MedMen, and as well as a lot of the work that other advocates and lobbyists and those who were incarcerated for cannabis have put into helping to normalize and destigmatize and decriminalize cannabis. And so there's been a lot of progress made since launching the Bluntness. But that said, there's also still a lot of work that still needs to be done. There's still a lot of stigma that exists. There's still a lot of misinformation that is disseminated out there. So, we're by no means, done with the work and mission that we set out to do.
And so you, on your platform, you obviously have advertisers. What are the typical advertisers that are on your platform?
There's no such thing as typical. It's still we're still in an education phase. I think a lot of cannabis marketers and brands are just unaware. Many are unsophisticated, and they tend to stick to the tried and true strategies and methods that work for them, which oftentimes, would entail a billboard, for example, near a dispensary, or SEO, which I think are good strategies. SEO in particular, to drive traffic to a store. So we're still doing a lot of education in terms of how people can activate specifically on our platform and platform like ours,
Mhm.
Which offer email marketing capabilities, or digital marketing capabilities, display ads, or sponsored content, where we could do product reviews or dispensary reviews or profiles, for example. Then there's certainly the social media component of what we do, and reaching people on social media. And then there's the experiential element. So creating, highly curated events where brands can reach consumers and consumers can learn about products that are available in their markets. So those are a few ways that we help brands reach consumers, and a few ways that, cannabis companies can advertise now. But like I said, a lot of cannabis brands just they don't want to run afoul of any compliance issues, and they tend to, again, play it very, very safe. And therein lies my challenge in terms of educating the market on the fact that there are compliant cannabis advertising opportunities.
Yeah. So,
So that
one thing I was just thinking of, Harrison, was how do you navigate, especially online, the credibility challenge? Because whether there's so many other voices out there, or coming to the forefront of something. There was recently an article in the news about people looking at TikTok for medical advice from just influencers.
Mhm.
For especially for the space that you're in, that's still developing. It's still pretty young. It's kind of not, I don't know if I want to say the wild, wild west, but it's, there's definitely, the compliance challenges and the markets and stuff like that. But how do you work to establish that credibility in that presence, with all the noise around you?
Me specifically, or just in
Well,
general, like how would I advise, a
well, like
cannabis
for
brand or a leader?
you and what you do with Bluntness, or like your perspective on, that part of, communication and marketing.
Yeah, I think for the end user, like a consumer, it is hard because there is a lot of information out there, to your point, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, or just, some random websites that pump content for various reasons and purposes. So, it can get confusing, and, different camps within the industry have different perspectives on things. But, for us, it's really just about putting out, quality content that does provide, you know, um, actionable information that consumers can act on, and help them make, the right decisions for their cannabis consumption, preferences, whether it's for health and wellness or for recreational purposes.
um,
So we're the arbiters of that, right? We help discern, the quality from the crap by talking, again, to the people that we know are at the forefront of the industry, and really, are the right stewards for, this type of message, and the industry moving forward.
so Harrison, you mentioned earlier in the conversation misinformation. Can you give us an example of misinformation in the cannabis world?
There's all kinds. That's a specific question. Let me try to land on a good example. So a lot of stories about how there's, fentanyl laced marijuana. I'm not saying there isn't cases of fentanyl laced marijuana, but the prevalent likelihood of that happening in most cannabis stores, even the illegal shops like that are prevalent here in New York, are so low that's fear mongering. So that type of message is just one of those things that the sort of anti-cannabis legalization movement often perpetuates and puts out there. The constant, refrain that there isn't enough research around cannabis in order to sort of validate its medicinal benefits. That's only a byproduct of the fact that it was federally illegal for so long, and still unfortunately remains so. However, there are a number of examples and cases that show the medicinal benefit of cannabis, when administered and tailored to a specific ailment or what have you. I've heard stories from very reputable doctors and patients as well who have used cannabis to reduce the size of their tumors using Rick Simpson oil, which is a special formulation of certain types of strains of cannabis in a highly concentrated form. And doctors can't even explain, how the tumors are shrinking. And they won't, make that connection because they don't want to validate cannabis as being beneficial or more beneficial than the things that they're recommending. So there's just a lot of that stuff out there. There's probably dozens of other examples, but those are a few that just sort of spring to mind.
Those are great. So how about the difference between CBD and THC? And do you talk about that on the platform?
We do. There's the biggest difference is that CBD is non-psychoactive and THC is the psychoactive component. They come from the same plant. CBD, as it's constructed in our country and regulated in our country, is derived from the hemp plant, the hemp marijuana plant, which has less than 0.3 grams or milligrams of THC in it. So it's, again, that's sort of the delineating factor.
Okay. And now, actually, I'm sorry, Chad, to take up, but I have a bunch of questions. So the next question I have is, you talked earlier that you actually got into the cannabis arena coming from sort of food, agricultural side. So what about cannabis and food and edibles? Can you talk a little bit about that? And do you have a lot of advertisers promoting that on your platform?
So yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing is cannabis is a very innovative industry. And it's still taking shape, and there's still innovations coming, whether it's from the extraction of the oils from the plant or the terpenes from the plant, whether it's taking the THC, the psychoactive components, and putting it into an edible so it reacts with your body faster. So it has like a nano emulsification that allows your body to absorb and experience the effects much, much quicker, whether it's through a gummy or an infused beverage. And beverage is probably a great place to dive into as well. It's one of the fastest growing categories right now in the industry, infused beverages. And there's a lot of innovation happening there. And it's probably going to be one of the formats that helps, further normalize cannabis in the country, if not the world. So that to me is what's interesting, as someone who comes from the tech industry and has represented the tech industry for so long. It was sort of my entry point, into cannabis, or was a focal point, having that, unique capability of understanding cannabis and tech and where they intersect. We've launched a cannabis payments platform called Hyper, also in that 2015-16 era, because cannabis banking is a challenge for the industry. We launched a company called Cloudponics, also in that time frame, that had this automated hydroponic grow box to grow cannabis at home. So there's a lot of overlap with technology. It's not just this plant that you smoke and that's it. There's a very dynamic industry with a lot of growth potential. And, for me, that's tremendously exciting. And I think that allows, for a lot of unique messaging, a lot of storytelling capabilities, a lot of branding and, marketing expertise and opportunities for brands. It's a very dynamic industry. I don't think, a lot of people appreciate it for that unless you're in it.
Yeah. So when I got a question when you're talking about your customer space, as far as, niching or, categorizing, a lot of people, well, I guess I just pushed a button. A lot of people, especially, entrepreneurship, starting new businesses and stuff like that. You always, you tend to hear like you need to niche down into, a certain focus category. The kiss of death is everybody's my customer type of thing. So what's your perspective on that? Whether it be from, whoever your persona is, your avatar, whoever it might be, or from a geographical perspective. Like if you're doing something in one state versus another state, Does that, do you have to kind of go down to that lowest common denominator from that perspective? And, how do identify those target niches and speak to them?
Yeah. I have my own unique perspective as an agency owner on niching down. There's certainly merits to it. I myself have been more of a generalist, certainly operating in a couple of core key verticals and delivering a couple of core key services, across the integrated marketing comms, flywheel. But, for us at the Bluntness specifically, in terms of how we target, like, for example, like, when we do our email list hygiene, we try to really, to your point, get as much information as we can about our readers and our subscribers as possible, so that way when we do run campaigns, we can be as targeted as we need to be on behalf of our advertising partners. We are a national publication. So we do speak to a lot of the legal markets in the United States, and there's over 30 states that are legal now, 24 of which are recreational. So for us, it's really just about providing a broad perspective, because consumption of cannabis is universal. I think the niching part is how does that relate to brands that are in Michigan, for example, versus the brands that are in Massachusetts. So, a Massachusetts brand is not going to advertise with us across our entire database, but we can do a very targeted campaign to those readers of ours or subscribers that are in Massachusetts or Michigan or California or New York, for example. So as we continue to build content around those regions, we build our database in those markets. And as brands expand from one state to another, we're a very viable solution for them to market beyond their home state as they do start to move. Because right now New York is coming online, and we're seeing a lot of California brands coming into the market. So we would be a pretty good partner for someone like them, because we have an ability to reach where they started and where they're going. And creating that type of opportunity has been, advantageous for those type of brands.
Do you think it's still primarily a digital communication, platform or channel? Do you see like branching out into, doing different types of marketing and communication, whether it's events or I don't know, whatever other media, that might be, out there? Or do you think it's like primarily, digital for you?
Well, I think everything is digital these days, but I think, as I said, in terms of what the Bluntness does, we as an agency owner or recovering agency owner, we help our clients solve problems, and using a various, any number of tools at our disposal. Experiential and events are certainly one of those. And I'm a big believer in the power of experiential events and getting product into consumers' hands, or, bringing consumers to a place to experience the product or service. That goes a long way. But, as a career marketer, there's no single solution that works for any brand. We have to understand, what is it that they're trying to accomplish, who they're trying to reach, and, figure out what levers do we need to push or pull, and invest in order to accomplish that. And it could be a mixture, which is what we recommend. Just like an investment strategy, you don't want to put all your eggs in a single basket. You want to have a nice, diverse communications mix across PR, across search, across social, and experiential. So, create and a content owned media strategy as well, with content, so you can, create your own, vehicle for getting consumers to opt in and engage with your brand.
So fascinating, Harrison. I'm listening to you, and I'm quite in awe of how much you've learned about the industry. Let me ask you this: what do you think is happening with the parallel industries like alcohol and tobacco and the crossover to cannabis? Can you talk a little bit about that?
What do you mean? You
Well,
drill into that a little bit more.
All of the large alcohol brands are probably thinking about cannabis. Obviously, you mentioned beverages.
Yes.
And then, of course, the tobacco companies are thinking about the smoking part, right? Smoking. So what do you see is happening, or what has happened to date, and what do you think is the future of the crossover industries relative to cannabis?
Yeah. Again, I'm not a cannabis expert. I just happen to know enough to be dangerous, so there are certainly people who are smarter than me and who are, really more actively involved in sort of at that level. But, from my vantage point though, I would throw pharmaceuticals into that mix as well. Alcohol, tobacco and pharmaceuticals are, very established, lobbying institutions in this country, and certainly they are and have been watching this category for a very long time. Some large companies like Constellation have made investments in cannabis already, as have some other tobacco companies and some pharma companies, and they are putting pressure on the people that make decisions in this country to stack the decks in their favor. And certainly that stuff happens, day in and day out at the state level as well as the federal level. So, it's still to be determined how that stuff plays out. The pharmaceutical industry wants to, patent and isolate certain cannabinoids and things like that so they can put it into medicine. And, we're not far from seeing that occur. As well as the medical cannabis industry, which also has, some of that, heavy pharmaceutical background and influence in it, and they're dominating markets that want to have more of a grassroots, homegrown, in-state industry that these opposing influences are especially in New York are coming to a head. We have farmers. New York has a very long history in the farming industry, and having these multi-state operators with deep pockets who want to come into New York, which is anticipated to be larger than even the California market, is creating a lot of friction in New York, because we have people who are trying to get their businesses up and running, and, they don't have a lot of capital. Farming in New York outdoors is challenging, but they're doing it, and they're doing it well. And, just to have these deep pocketed, large medical multi-state operators come into the state and just kind of, steamroll their way to, the riches is somewhat off-putting. And that's where some of the regulations, like in New York, for example, were set up to kind of, at least slow that movement down. It hasn't quite panned out as intended, but to answer your question, though, there is a lot of interest from those industries in this sector. They will be major players in this, but we all believe that there is enough room for everybody, and
that's the question I have. That's the question I have.
Yeah.
Is there room right now for small business people to actually enter the cannabis world, or is that window already being closed?
No, I think there's always, the United States is built on the backs of small businesses. It's really what makes this country, thrive is small businesses. So I think that we are still going to see, micro brands and small mom and pop brands, whether it's, in the edible category or what have you. And they'll be alongside, some of the larger brands. Whole Foods has small brands that have products on the shelves right alongside the larger brands that, we all know and are familiar with. So, I just think for those small businesses that want to get into the category, it's just important to educate themselves on the pros and cons of this industry. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for those who, lack experience in business acumen. You have to come into this industry with both eyes open and hopefully and preferably with capital investment, because it is not an industry that you can just scrape by like a services industry, for example, where you can keep the overhead low and still operate and kind of, reinvest in the business. Cannabis is a very capital intensive business, no matter where you plug into it. So just some people come into it not knowing that, and they're, because there isn't a lot of available capital. You can't get a traditional loan, for example, in cannabis, and there's a lot of predatory lending in cannabis, right? So some people have fallen prey to that, unfortunately. So that's just one of those things. Just go in with both eyes open, educate yourself first, learn as much as you can, find the right mentors that you can, really gel with and help guide you, and who share your vision. So that's my recommendation. And I think those that find that will succeed and, will do well as a small business. And over time, ultimately, most of those brands will probably get acquired, if they survive. So the ones that survive, if they have a strong enough brand and have a strong brand story and a very rabid fan base, they will be, a part of a roll-up strategy at some point from some of the larger companies.
Well, this has
You
been
compare some of the stuff that you've done in other spaces, like let's talk about crisis communications. Obviously the pandemic happened. Industries, how many were caught flat-footed? It's one of those, oh yeah, I need to have a crisis plan, and people didn't have it. Even the government, it's supposed to have all these binders on how to respond to everything, and they lost the binder. And
Right.
how do you see that in the industry that you work in now, in the cannabis industry, as far as, if a celebrity comes out and says something that, people may think is negative, or, like Elon Musk, I like marijuana, I then stick my foot in my mouth here, or something like that. Is the industry durable enough, or do small businesses need to have that concern as far as being able to respond to stuff like that happens that might impact, how well they do or thrive?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think as an industry itself, cannabis specifically, probably is not thinking about crisis or most things. They're literally building the plane as they're flying it. And it's just, if it comes up, they'll deal with it as it comes up. From what I've seen in my experience, very few operators in the space, really have that type of strategic acumen where they're mitigating and planning, and have that sort of that binder that you're talking about of things that they need to be planning for and avoiding and being prepared for if it happens. So it's fascinating for that reason. But I think at a larger scale, the multi-state operators are a bit more sophisticated that way. They certainly have a lot more to lose. Some are publicly traded, so they are the ones that typically have those type of plans in place and kind of operate with that type of mentality. The smaller operators don't. I don't think they're, again, this isn't even on their radar. They're trying to monetize the square footage in their stores. They're trying to get their products on shelves. They're trying to pass compliance with the product that they've grown. There's so many other layers that they have to satisfy that, a crisis or saying something wrong is so low on that totem pole, but it could bubble up, and oftentimes does. And, that's when we get the call, and, they need us to help put out the fire. And, it is what it is, and we have to assess what the severity, of it is, and, what the fallout will be, and help guide them towards, the best way to mitigate that opportunity. As much as we try to convince and advise clients as well as others that we see in the industry to get ahead of these potential opportunities, you don't feel that, it's like life insurance, right? You feel like you don't need it, until you need it, or health insurance. It's the same thing.
Well, it sounds like most small businesses.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
It's like
100%.
it's
So
a resource, it's a time, it's not a priority. But so
So-
we're about
yes,
33 minutes. Michael, you got any questions or anything you want to wrap up with?
Yes, actually, we've gone over a little bit of the time, but I've been finding this conversation fascinating. I've been listening to you, Harrison. I've learned a tremendous amount. I know our audience is going to learn a great deal, but a few more moments, if you would.
Absolutely.
What is the future of the Bluntness? What are your plans for the Bluntness? And tell us about the future of the Bluntness, please.
The Bluntness is a labor of love, Michael. I can't quit it. But candidly, I do see it having a future, in continuing to provide a platform for those in the industry that are, really pushing the industry forward, and trying to get it to a place where it's accepted as normal, which it should be. And for us, it's a great experience to be a part of that and to help facilitate that, and be a part of that narrative, as well as just continuing to grow our audience and provide reliable, actionable information to consumers, and a vehicle for brands to reach those consumers in a viable way. And we're leaning into events. We've seen a lot of success in our events and experiential business. We actually have a few events coming up this month in December in New York. And cannabis is one of those things that needs to be experienced. So, there's definitely a strong push towards, leaning into that side of our business, more so than even the editorial side.
So if we, I guess, www.bluntness.com.
Thebluntness.com. The Bluntness.
Right. Let's say it again. www.thebluntness.com. And the events you talked about, people can find that listed on the platform as well.
On social media, yep, at Bluntness Media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I don't even want to mention Twitter because we haven't been active on there for all the obvious reasons.
Okay.
We'll
Well,
go ahead and peddle, links in the show notes, as well. In addition to Harrison's links, we'll also have links for Michael's business, Voice of Reason Consulting, and for some of my enterprises as well. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode of the Meaningful Communication Show. Harrison, thank you very much for being a guest this week. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad.
And Michael, as always, it's great to have you as I don't know who's Batman and who's Robin, but
depends on the day. Depends on the day.
Batmans. But as always, great to have do the show together. And we will be back with our next episode soon. And you can find it on the YouTube channel at the Meaningful Communication Show, and also on our LinkedIn profiles as well. So with that, everybody take care. Thank you very much. And we will see you next time.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks, Harrison. Bye-bye. Thanks, Chad.